Okay, good afternoon. Thank you those who have waited a few minutes here with us. We still got a few more people coming on board. As we do that, though, I have an opportunity here to introduce you guys to our new wholesale director, which is going to be Tiffany Walker. Some of you guys might know Tiffany already. She's been with RCN for quite a while now, but now that Dave Young has left, Tiffany will be taking over the correspondent lending channel. So, Tiffany, introduce yourself to the correspondent lenders on the line, please.
Good afternoon, everyone. As Chris had mentioned, my name is Tiffany Walker. I was previously a loan officer here at RCN, top producer, and now moved into the new business development manager for our wholesale channels. So I'll be your, contact in regards to big picture items, strategy, whatever it is that you guys really need to take your businesses to the next level. Of course, you have your assigned LOs that, are your boots on the ground type people. But, if you have questions or need anything, I'm always here to help. So very excited, really looking forward to, making a huge impact for RCN and also for your companies individually as well. And excited to learn a little more about our ground up construction with you guys today. So thank you, Chris. Take it away.
Thank you, Tiffany. All right, guys, let's get started. We've gotten a lot of inquiries since we've done a little bit of a soft rollout on the ground up construction product. And there's certain things that we want to cover on the front end here when it comes to the guidelines to make this a little bit easy for everybody and try to highlight some of the differences between this particular product and some of the other products that you might be more comfortable with, but also maybe have some similarities, but there's certainly some differences there too. So want to get into it right here with some of the basics that we have for the product. For collateral types that we will consider doing a ground up construction project, this should be pretty similar to what you guys are used to seeing on the bridge loan product currently, right? It's your standard 1 to 4 family residences, townhomes, condos, your 5+ multifamily apartment buildings, and mixed use properties. Again, mixed use, we want to be looking for mixed use properties that have predominantly apartment space to them. And then as far as loan size, we're going to be looking for a minimum loan size of 50,000 all the way up to 3 million for your standard 1 to 4 families. When it comes to the multifamily or mixed use properties, we want at least a loan size of 250,000 on those ones. So make sure that when it comes to those multifamily mixed use properties, those are always going to have a higher threshold of to get an approval for RCN anyway. But make sure you're hitting kind of the minimum requirements on those ones in particular when you're vetting those out with your borrowers directly, right? If they're coming to you and they've got $120,000 project for a mixed use property, it's not going to be a fit. So we can be pretty quick about some of those and not have to go through the motions, because as you guys have experienced when it comes to those commercial assets, there's going to be a little bit of a more involved pre-approval and vetting process, and that'll be a little bit similar to what we're going to do on the ground up construction as well. But we've created a template to help you actually with both of those scenarios so that those can be moved through our approval process a little bit faster and get you guys a quick turnaround time when you do have those deals to be submitted. Our standard term for the ground up construction product is going to be 18 months. This is going to give us a lot more flexibility for these projects. As we know, timelines are going to take a little bit longer on some of these in general because we have to go through potentially approval and permitting process. There's going to be more inspections involved in these projects as well. So the process in general is going to take a little bit longer. And we want to make sure there's enough time for the contractors and borrowers themselves to be able to complete these transactions and then give them enough time to exit the loan, whether that's through a refinance into another mortgage product like our 30-year, or perhaps just putting it on the market and selling it and taking the gross proceeds. Our initial advance on the loan is going to be maximum 75% of the as-is value. That is not necessarily going to be where all the initial advances on a loan wind up. There's going to be some constraints to these projects based on loan to cost as well as LTV. We'll look at a couple of those options in the loan sizer itself, but best case scenario would be 75% of the as-is value. In a lot of these circumstances, though, we're going to see investors who have already purchased the land, and we'll give them credit for that land purchase, but in most areas, the land is going to cost a lot less than the actual construction cost will. So that can play a factor in what they actually get up front. So we want to be careful about where we're setting those expectations with borrowers about what they're going to get at the table versus what they're actually going to be quoted up front. So be careful and make sure we're using the sizers before we commit to any kind of terms or suggestions of terms to your borrowers. Our max loan amount is going to be capped at 75% of the after repair value of the property. This is true on our bridge loans as well. 75% of the ARV is kind of the standard max we'll go to. However, depending on, if we have a situation where the ARV is high enough, best case scenario on this particular product will be 90% loan to cost. That loan to cost will be made up of the purchase price of the land itself and the actual construction and rehab costs to build out the property. So we'll give 90% of those combined totals. Our minimum property value for any single family property should be $100,000 at least. And that's going to be based on the completed value of the construction. Some markets do have a higher threshold. You guys have seen that in some of the other places that we do business in on bridge loans, such as, Philadelphia is one of those markets, Baltimore, Cleveland, Atlanta, what have you, might show up on there. So look to see, again, the sizer is going to help you figure that stuff out, though. Our minimum value per unit on any 2 to 4 unit properties is going to be $60,000. And again, some of those will be higher in those, particular markets that we have set aside. Our minimum credit score for this product is going to be a 680. That said, with that 680 score, basically, if you've hit the 680 score, you're more or less going to be able to qualify for the same kind of pricing options and LTVs mostly as every other person who, even if you had a 720 or a 750 score, this one's really going to be more based on experience and just making sure you hit the minimums there. The lowest rate for this particular product is going to be 8.25%, but I would expect most of these to be shown, at least on the base pricing level, to have a rate somewhere between that 8.25 and say, like 10 to 11 on the high side. Most of the ones we've seen, though, are usually between 9 and 10% is the most common area there. All right. So as I mentioned, one of the big factors for this loan in particular is going to be borrower's experience and track record. This is calculated totally differently than how we do it for our typical bridge loans and fix and flip products. So this is an area where we want to make sure you and your staff are completely aware of what the requirements are when it comes to hitting one of these different tier groups that we have. So our top tier, our most qualified guarantors for these particular types of transactions are going to be people who've done at least 10 ground up construction deals themselves. So this, again, when we say they've done them themselves, we want to see that they're an owner of record on those projects. As you guys might be aware, when it comes to experience for the fix and flip stuff we do, we have that 3-year look back period. You can get partial credit for like 4 and 5 years ago. For ground up construction, we're going to be a little bit more flexible with the timeline that we look back on. So I would say, generally anything back within the last 5 years, we'll be happy to count for ground up construction experience. During the template submission form that you guys are going to be submitting in, there is a whole tab on there that will allow the borrower to list out what experience they do have. You definitely want to get that filled out so we can verify that stuff on the front end and not be surprised. As many of you know, a borrower might tell you they've done 4 or 5 projects, and then we actually go to verify that information and it wasn't quite true. They might have been the realtor on those projects. They might have just been a guy helping out, who knows what. But we want to make sure they're actually on record with those deals. And so anybody who's done at least 10 or more, that's going to get you into the absolute top tier of the product itself. Tier number 2 is somebody who's done between 7 and 9 ground up construction deals. Tier 3 would be anybody who's done at least somewhere between 4 and 6 ground up construction deals or heavy rehab deals. And the key for those heavy rehab deals is going to be rehab deals that consist of situations where there was expansion to the property or a change in use or something that's going to qualify them as having to really interact with the town and have to go through a permitting and an approval process for the projects that they're doing. That's really what we're looking for when it comes to those heavy rehabs. We'll focus on that a couple of times just to kind of reiterate what we're looking for there. It can't just be, well, we did a bunch of fix and flips, so that qualifies. It's not quite the same thing. We're really looking for that experience of working with the town and permitting process. Tier 4 be our low end qualification, qualified guarantors who have completed at least one ground up construction transaction. So if they've done at least one, easy qualifier there. If they haven't done one themselves, then we're going to look to see if maybe they've got enough of the heavy rehab projects to qualify, or there's a fallback option of having the actual builder contractor be a guarantor on the loan as well. Or bringing in some sort of other partner who can provide some experience to the transaction. Again, for the heavy rehab scenarios, for these to count, we really want the project to have contained some sort of change in use or expansion or addition to the property, right? And that's GLA. We're expanding the gross living area of the property. Oftentimes we'll see borrowers who are saying, you know, I'm adding 500 square feet to the property. But what they're really doing is they're finishing a basement. Below grade square footage is not counted the same as above grade. So finishing a basement wouldn't be considered an expansion of the property. What we're really talking about there is somebody who, you know, takes a, you know, one level ranch and they put a second floor on it. That's an expansion. Or they blow out the back of the house and add a new kitchen and do things like that. That's what we're talking about when we're talking about expansion. And again, we're looking for that experience in dealing with the city and the town to go through that permitting and approval process. That's going to be the key there that we're going to get comfortable with. When it comes to our commercial properties that anybody's looking to do a ground up project on, we're really looking for commercial specific experience, right? So that's experience with prior multifamily or mixed use properties. And again, in these scenarios, we're going to be looking at pretty heavy qualifications for the commercial properties. We want people to have at least 5 ground up projects for the commercial properties in their track record to be able to say yes to those. Heavier threshold there, but that is a way more complicated project. There's a lot more involved there. I don't imagine we're going to get a ton of those, but if you do happen to find a builder who will qualify for it, we're happy to be looking at those for sure. All right. So now we want to look at what types of projects we should be looking for when we're talking to our borrowers. And in this this product type in particular, we're really looking for you guys on the correspondent lender side to be our voice with these borrowers that you're dealing with, or maybe it's a broker in between. Although usually on ground up, I've been seeing that it's mostly borrowers direct that we're going to be working with. And the types of things that we need to ask them on the phone, we're going to be relying on you guys to complete that process, right? We want to make sure up front that there's a good understanding of what this project is, that it conforms to the market that it's in, and that this is going to be something that we can have vetted out pretty quickly on the front end, so we can give you guys a thumbs up or thumbs down about whether this is a project that's going to work or not. So what we're looking for in particular for the project itself is that the property is being constructed in an area that has similar homes already in that area, right? We want to see that it's conforming to the neighborhood that it's located in. You want to find that if somebody's building a 1,500 square foot ranch with 3 bedrooms and 2 baths, that we're in a neighborhood that would similarly support a house like that, right? If you're in a neighborhood that's surrounded by a bunch of, 1,200 square foot capes, and somebody wants to build a 6,000 square foot monstrosity that doesn't have any comps in the neighborhood, that's going to be a failing project for us. It's got to be something that fits to the area that it's in already. If you're already in an area where there are those 6,000 square foot properties, then we're probably in the right market. But you want to be, really in tune with what's happening in that specific market. And we're going to be looking for properties that have a similar size, which is going to include the gross living area, how many actual square feet of living space there is in that property. Similar room counts, bed and bath counts. Construction style, whether that be, if you're in an area where there's a lot of colonials or ranches, split levels, what have you, make sure that whatever we're building is somewhat similar to what you're seeing in that marketplace. You don't want to have a, log built A-frame going up and then it's in a neighborhood of, raised ranches or something like that. And then the price point should also be compared to what the surrounding homes are selling for, right? We understand there's going to be a little bit of a premium because these will be brand new properties and they're going to be, never lived in before. But you do want to see that there's an established price point for what the investor is expecting to sell that property for when the project is all said and done. Obviously, like we just said, new construction homes will have a little bit of a premium on them, but we don't want to be too far away from what the going rate is in that particular neighborhood. Again, you're trying to avoid the outlier properties. And we want to look for properties that are comparable within a 1 mile radius of the subject property, right? Has the investor done their homework and already found their own comps? Maybe they've run a CMA in the area to see what they think the finished price would be for that home. By all means, send us that information. That's great information for us to have. It saves us from having to spend the extra time and go looking for comps ourselves. The more of that information we can get of where the borrower's thinking is, the better we're going to feel about the project moving forward. And we should also be asking if they're aware of any other ground up construction projects or new builds in the area. Maybe there's some homes that have already sold in this market. Maybe the builder themselves is the one who built them. That's a great reference point. We're looking to see that the builders have familiarity with the markets that they are building in the first place. That goes a long way towards the experience factor as well. And it should be something that they're comfortable with. But if we see a builder who has never before been in that particular market, it doesn't mean we can't do it, but we're certainly going to ask more questions on those particular deals. Whereas if you have an established builder in that market, then we know that's a builder who's already been through town approvals and things like that, the permitting, the inspections. They're familiar with all that stuff already. And that gives them a good advantage going forward. Beware the white elephants. If you're not familiar with the phrase, the white elephants are the kind of one-off properties that don't fit that market. Those are ones that are not going to get approved. And we should be looking for those in our interview screening process on the front end. We want to make sure, as I said, these are conforming to the neighborhoods that they are in. And lastly here, no tract developments. The properties should already be in established areas. We're not looking for somebody who's building a new street and developing a whole new subdivision and all that kind of stuff. Those are going to be outlier projects for us. We want established areas so that we have a good understanding that the value is already going to be there and that this home is already conforming to that market. If they have to build up the neighborhood first to establish that market and that price point, those are going to be areas where we're going to say no. So some of the unique guidelines we're going to see here, this will be some variations from what we might see on some of our other stuff. A couple of things to note for sure. All projects will require a property survey, feasibility study, and contractor review. The survey is something that they're going to have to likely get themselves. I would suggest they work with their closing attorney or their title company to make sure that the survey they get is going to be sufficient to get a survey endorsement from the title company for closing. That will be required. All loans will also require an environmental screening report. For those of you who have done maybe a 5+ multifamily or mixed use property, you're already familiar with those. We get those back generally in 24 hours or less. They're $150. We will order those generally at the same time or before we order the appraisal and feasibility study. That way, if the property does show some history of environmental issues there, we can kind of pump the brakes on the project and maybe stop spending money on these other reports in advance. Like our fix and flip loans or rehab loans that we currently do, each project is limited to a maximum of 9 draws. So that's something to be considered, particularly on some of these larger builds that might be going on. If we do have a situation where maybe the build is $1.5–2 million or something like that, raise the issue with your loan officer on those circumstances so we can make sure that the draw process will be workable for your investors. Maybe there's some wiggle room that we can get there for alleviation on the cap of the number of draws. Loans over $1 million will require escrow for taxes and insurance. This will be not as bad as it sounds, just because a lot of these properties are going to have a very low tax rate based on the fact that there's just a lot of land. Budgets must include a 10% contingency, and that's really going to be baked in there for any kind of overruns or what ifs and change orders and things like that that are bound to happen on these projects. No matter how many times people have done fix and flips or builds and things like that, there's always going to be a change in the cost somewhere along the line. A lot of investors can absorb those costs on their own without issue, but to kind of alleviate some of the potential problems that would come in there, we want to make sure that each budget's already going to contain a 10% contingency when we receive it on the front end. And that's super important also for the feasibility study itself. For the feasibility study to come back as feasible, you're going to want to see that 10% rehab contingency already in the budget. If it's not, the feasibility study company will be sending those back to us as not feasible until we add those. So it's better off on the front end to make sure that we review those rehab budgets and make sure that contingency is already in there before we place the order. Otherwise, you'll have some back and forth there with the inspection company, and it's only going to slow the process down. And that holds true also on any fix and flip deals that we do where there's a feasibility study requirement. Make sure you always have that 10% contingency in there. That will always give you the best benefit and option to make sure those are going to go through and come back as feasible projects. The soft costs within the budget are going to be limited to 15% of that total cost for the construction. Soft costs would be things like permits, plans, things like that that aren't hard material or labor costs for the project, but are still necessary for the project itself. Excuse me, sorry about that. Turn off my phone. The minimum return on investment we're looking for on these properties, if they're going to be selling them after the fact, is going to be 15%. So that's a pretty reasonable bar to hit, particularly for a ground-up construction project. And I don't think many people will have any trouble hitting that. The other option too, though, is if they plan to hold that property as a rental long-term, which might be more true for any of your multi-family projects or 2 to 4 family projects. Those ones we want to see a minimum debt yield of 10% for properties that will be held as rentals after construction. That 10% is basically going to be your gross annual rents divided by your total loan amount. As long as that number is at least 10%, you're going to be a-okay on those. Anybody who's going to be looking at a plot of land and wanting to further subdivide that property into smaller lots, that should all be done prior to our loan. Once the loan is in place, we don't want investors subdividing the lots further any more at that point. That creates a bit of a legal challenge when it comes to updating the documentation with the towns and the cities and then getting approvals from investors to release portions of the collateral. So again, best case scenario is any kind of subdividing that needs to happen. Take care of that on the front end so it won't be a problem as we move forward. Water well, sewer, septic, these should be lateral at the time of the loan so that what we're talking about there is, somebody's got the plot of land already. They're in a particular neighborhood. There's other houses involved. All they need to do is, tap into the utilities that are already at the street. We're going to be cautious of any scenarios where the property is a little bit more removed from the typical public utilities and things like that, and where those are not in place. So again, making sure that the utilities are easily connectable is going to be a good starting point for us, because if those are not set up at the time of the loan, that can take a long time for that to actually be established. Whereas if it's already at the curb, then all we got to do is, dig up the front yard there and connect it. A lot easier process, lot easier timeline for this to work. Next on the list, we're going to have a minimum 6-month interest reserve required. The reserve funds are not applied to payments until the project actually breaks ground. Until then, the borrower would be making their own payments. You'll actually find that a lot of investors expect and are actually appreciative of having a interest reserve built into these loans. Makes it a little easier on the peace of mind there to move forward. And depending on what your project costs are going to be, check with your loan officer. They will be able to inform you what the actual dollar amount will be for that reserve requirement. Guarantors cannot have any foreclosures within the last 36 months. They should have no bankruptcies, short sales, deeds in lieu of foreclosures within the last 24 months. This is already similar to our existing products, although there's some variation within the other products of whether certain benchmarks are 24 or 36 months. For this one, though, and for all our other products, if you generally just told people 36 months was the look back period, that would keep you safe on just about everything. I think on some of the multifamily or mixed use, it might actually go out to 48 months in one of those scenarios. But for the most part, anything 1 to 4, we're going to be okay here. So property seasoning is a big difference on this particular product compared to everything else we do. You guys should already be a little bit familiar with our seasoning requirements when it comes to our fix and flip or even 30-year program. If there's an existing mortgage on those properties, we have to be at least 3 months from the date of purchase for that to be counted as a refi or cash out. If they purchase that property with all cash, then we have to be at least 6 months from the date of purchase for that to be counted as a refi or a cash out. In these particular scenarios for ground up construction, all seasoning is going to be 24 months. And the advantage of this is if they bought the land within the last 24 months, we want to be able to count that as a purchase. You're going to get better LTVs on a purchase anyway. And land does not have the same fluctuation in value as we'll see with your typical established properties either. So important to note that when we're pricing out these deals on the sizer, to find out when did they buy the land and how much did they pay for the land. These will be critical components as far as getting everything into the sizer correctly and getting the proper pricing out on the back end. And again, confirming when they bought the land is going to be key. Confirming what the prices they paid for the land is going to be key as well. And making sure that all these components are vetted on the front end so that we're not misquoting people as we get into the process. We want this to be pretty streamlined and steady for them. Okay, so some best practices you guys can use that might help out the situation on the front end. If the lot doesn't have an address, if you just get kind of the, I forget what they call the description, I'm blanking on it right now, but if you just get like the parcel ID number, we'll take that by all means. But one of the easier ways to get us to looking at the surrounding area in the neighborhood is to provide the address of a neighboring property as well. So that we can, really check out the area, make sure that this project is going to actually conform to the market that it's in. It's a good way also for you guys to get yourselves familiarized with what is in that neighborhood and what's established using websites like, Realtor.com, Trulia, Zillow, Redfin, Property Shark, all the above can give you some insights into the property. But one of the best things that we like to do is get on Google Street View and just drive around the neighborhood and see what kind of houses we're seeing, see what kind of area that's in. That'll give us a good idea of whether this is going to be a conforming project to that neighborhood. And we always want to make sure we're completing the ground up construction template to submit the deals over to your loan officers. That template will be available to everybody. If you guys don't have one, we'll certainly make the materials available. Your loan officer already has this template as well, so feel free to reach out to them and ask them for the ground up construction template so you guys can submit the deals over. After we do the PowerPoint presentation, we'll actually be going through that template quickly to kind of highlight some of the areas on there. And that's also going to lead you guys to best practices as far as what you want to discuss on those phone calls you're going to have with these borrowers, just to make sure that everything that you're plugging into this templates and plugging into the sizer is actually matching up with what the reality is from the borrower's perspective. We want to inquire about how far along the borrower is in obtaining the land, permits, approvals. Do they have entitlements in place? It's really important to understand where they are in these projects because we've only been doing this a short while and we've already seen a wide range of borrowers at different stages of thinking about or doing a ground up construction project. We have people who are shopping for the land still. They haven't really done anything yet, but they're just inquiring about, well, if I did do this, what would it look like? And we can certainly do those kind of what if scenarios, but it does tend to vary depending on what the actual numbers are. So try to get some good numbers for what they're at least thinking about doing, and we can get a better idea of when this loan can actually start and when we can get these things running. Again, we want to drill down on the experience. We want to include the addresses of any ground up construction projects that they've done in the ground up construction template under the experience tab. Again, we'll show you guys where that all is. We want to make sure we're also asking the guarantor about their cash reserves. Some of you guys already are getting personal financial statements from investors that you're working with. That's a great practice here for the ground up construction project as well. It's not a requirement that you have a personal financial statement, but it does make the process easier on our end to vet out those guarantors. They're certainly going to need cash reserves to be able to handle the draw process and establishing some of the work themselves to get these projects off the ground. So making sure we have a full understanding of what they can really show is in their bank accounts makes a huge difference. Now, to drill down a little further on that, we can count personal bank accounts and statements. We can count business bank accounts and statements. Our key there is we want to be able to tie that guarantor to the ownership of those accounts. As long as we can do that, we will count those reserves for them. Retirement assets, as per usual, we'll count at 50% of face value. Ask the guarantor what the finished house will be. For example, are they building a 1,500 square foot ranch with 3 beds, 2 baths, and a 1-car garage? Great. Now we know that we're going to be looking for those types of similar properties in that neighborhood that we're going to be building in. Again, making sure that we're conforming to the market will be a key component here. And I would also say that as we start out this process, you're going to want to use the loan sizer rather than the loan calculator in BLN for the short term at least. And the reason I say that is the sizer is going to give you a little bit more feedback on what might be impacting the loan that you might not be seeing on the calculator. There's a little bit of the behind the scenes stuff that doesn't really make it into the polished version of the calculator, which I think would be helpful for you guys when it comes to looking at the loan sizer and why you might not be getting max terms in a particular scenario. And as with any project that you might be considering for one of your borrowers, check with your loan officer if you have any questions. The sizer might be pricing something out for you, but with this product in particular, we have some flexibility there with the pricing model. So some of you might have seen that you priced out a deal and it gave you a negative initial advance on the loan. Okay, well, check with your loan officer on something like that. There's still a good chance that we might be able to do more in those scenarios than what the sizer is actually giving you, because there's so many different components that go into the qualification of these loans. We're going to be as flexible as we can to make these deals work where it makes sense. And particularly on 1 to 4 family construction projects, there's going to be a lot more wiggle room in there to make adjustments to the loan and make common sense moves to help qualify that deal. So it's something that'll be a little bit more fluid when it comes to those items, but certainly want to make sure that we aren't turning anything down that might otherwise look like a good loan. So let's make sure that anytime we have a scenario that maybe doesn't look like it's pricing out right, let's check with our loan officers on those. And also make sure you're checking with the borrower about what their exit strategy is for the loan. I think a lot of us are going to assume that people are going to be building these houses and then selling them off, which probably will be the more likely scenario. But there's going to be plenty of investors, particularly in the current market, who are going to build and hold as rentals. And they're going to basically do a cash out refi loan to take the money, the equity back out of the property and then invest that in their new project. That's going to be and continues to be in the current marketplace a very popular strategy. And we want to make sure that our investors are having the right expectations set about what the requirements are for them to hit the loan. As we mentioned on the previous slide, you can certainly do a project that's going to be a build and then sale at the end of it, but you want to make sure that then in that circumstance, we're going to hit that 15% return on investment requirement. If they're going to be holding it as a rental property, then we want to make sure that they're hitting that 10% debt yield requirement. And that's also going to play a factor into what kind of type of appraisal we're going to order for that particular property. If we're doing a loan where they're going to hold it as a rental investment, well, then I want to make sure that our appraisal is also going to do an analysis of what the market rents would be, whether it's a 1007 or a 216 income analysis from an appraiser. So that'll be a key component so that we can establish what the proper qualifications for the loan are, but also to make sure that we're ordering the right report when we get the appraisal. Okay, so required reports and what the draw process is going to look like. Our environmental screening report, you guys, as I mentioned, if you've done a multifamily or mixed use property before, those are $150. They'll come back generally the same day. If the report does show that there's a higher environmental risk assessment in place, in those circumstances, we will go a step further and get a mini phase 1 environmental study done when available. If we can't get a mini phase 1 in a particular market, then it would have to be a full phase 1. But we'll do everything we can to try to keep the cost and the timeline down in those circumstances. I think recently we just had somebody order a mini phase 1. That pricing has come down over the years. I think it used to be like 600 something bucks. The most recent one we ordered was only 400 bucks. So again, we're doing everything we can on our end to kind of cut into those vendors that we use and make sure that the costs are going to be reasonable and timely. There's a feasibility study required and a contractor review required on all ground up construction projects. These are typically 600 bucks. For your multifamily and mixed use properties, those are bidded quotes. Those will be differently priced, but for your standard projects, those are going to be 600 bucks. We will need not only the rehab budget and the plans, but we will also want to get the contractor's contact information so that they can also be vetted as part of that process. And again, reiterating here, but it's important. We want to make sure that the borrower knows that they need a property survey, and they should confirm this with their title company to make sure that the survey that they order and buy is sufficient for the title endorsement needed for the loan. Similar process for the draws as what our current process is on heavy rehab projects. If you have any investors currently who are doing some of these heavy rehab projects, you're going to be seeing some similarities for sure. So the hard cost for the rehab will only be released when there are approved plans and permits in place. They shouldn't be requesting draws before that's been put into place. Each draw will include a title rundown to make sure there are no mechanics liens put onto the property during the life of that loan, or any other liens in particular. We want to make sure that nothing has happened that we were unaware of, but mechanics liens in particular are the most common thing that we're going to see in those circumstances. For those not familiar, this is going to be a lien that would be put on place by a contractor who said they didn't get paid for work completed. That would be a typical mechanics lien that we might see show up on a property. And that would be something that has to be cleared before we could proceed with that particular loan. As part of the draw process, you guys have seen this before most likely, but the borrower submits the draw request form, and then they also provide lien release waivers from their contractors and subs, basically saying, yes, these contractors have already been paid for the work that was completed, and that we can continue to move forward with the loan. The standard draw fee for inspection and wire on a single family ground up project is going to be $349. For a 2 to 4 family, it will likely be $599. For 5+ multifamily and mixed use, there will be higher fees there. That's going to be a bid process dependent upon the project itself. As you guys can imagine, a 60-unit apartment building is going to be far different than what a 6-unit mixed use is going to be. So that really depends on the size and scope of those projects. But you're going to see higher fees here just because of the different amount of work that's required on these particular scenarios. They're going to be a little bit more behind the scenes doing some work for these loans for us when we do these inspections. So there'll be a little bit of a extra cost from what you see on the typical 1 to 4 family rehab projects. But the investor should be able to expect this. And these fees that we are being charged on the servicing side, they will be just netted out of the proceeds that the borrower is going to receive. So if they were going to get a draw for $10,000, let's say, that draw would just be $10,000 less the $349 fee. We're not going to ask the borrower to pay us separately for the draw inspection fees. That'll just come out of the proceeds. I want to give you guys some heads up and some contact information here as well. If you see any errors or miscalculations in the loan sizer that's in BLN, please reach out to support with Jacob and Matt at Bridge Loan Network there. The support email is support@bridgeloannetwork.com. Jacob and Matt are also happy to do any trainings for you guys upon request. We can certainly get those scheduled for you and your team. Particularly important if you have any new team members that might be coming on board and are looking to get a little bit of a help into how they can acclimate to using the system themselves. This would be great training for anybody that might be coming onto your staff. The other things that's available too is we do all these trainings for you guys. These are all recorded. BLN has a video library on YouTube as well that can be accessed. So feel free to reach out to us there as well if you're looking for any of these trainings. We generally send out the recordings as well. So if you guys need anything, you have new staff, or you're just looking for a refresher, we have these resources available. Let's make sure we're taking our best opportunity to get into these and use these so that everybody has all the necessary information on their fingertips. And what I want to show you guys here as we kind of transition over is this, what you're seeing now is the ground up construction and multi-unit template deal. Quickly, the multi-unit template is for any kind of 5+ or mixed use projects that are going to be going on. This is not limited to ground up construction. This is good for the bridge loan and for the long-term multifamily that's out there as well. And just some basic questions that we're going to be looking for. What type of property is it? How many units are there? What's the loan type going to be? Purchase, rate and term, cash out, what have you. And again, making sure we're just going through each of these kind of fields and making sure that there's an understanding of what the borrower's intentions are and what the property actually is and is not. So going through these is a great little checklist for yourselves to be able to vet these deals out as we go through the process of screening them on the front end with your investors. So again, great template and easy to use so that if you have a multifamily or mixed use property that you're looking to get financing for, get this template filled out, send it over to your loan officer. This will give us the best opportunity to give you guys a fast turnaround time. If we don't have this information on the front end, it might take a few days of back and forth to get this figured out. And then by the time we've got it figured out, then we got to submit it off for approval. That can take a day or so. So we want to make sure as quickly in the process as possible, we've got all the necessary information so we can get back to you guys quickly and you guys can respond back to the investors quickly. But I would say it's still important to let your investors know that, particularly on the 5+ multifamily and mixed use deals, there's a slower process for those for sure. Those are going to get a lot of eyeballs on them. We're going to vet those pretty heavily. And we want to set those expectations with them that they're probably not going to get a quick answer when it comes to the 5+ and mixed use deals. Excuse me. All right. Now for ground up construction, this will be the area that you guys really need to work on so that we can make sure there's an efficient process in place. And this template will really help your employees too, so that they can kind of stay on task and make sure they're asking the right questions anytime they're screening somebody either over the phone or somebody submits an inquiry via email to you or through your website. These are the kind of questions we want to run through on the front end to make sure that this is a deal that can be submitted and completed through RCN. So again, at the top we discussed here, put in the property address. If you don't have one or you just have the parcel ID, by all means give us the parcel ID. But if there's a neighboring property that we can use and use that address, put that in there as well. Like I said, we want to get a sense of what's in the neighborhood in that marketplace, and this is going to be the best place for us to kind of get that starting point. Again, choosing the drop down, you can pick the appropriate property type from the list. You can choose the appropriate purchase or refi kind of options here. If they purchase the land, great. How much did they pay for the land? That's going to be a critical component, and that's going to be something that has to wind up in the sizer anyway. So can't stress enough how important it is to make sure we're actually hitting all these fields. Any of the property type information or how many units it's going to be, this is obviously going to be based on the completed version of the project, not what it is now. Some of you guys might have investors who are looking to do a construction project, but that particular property that's on the lot might be a bit of a tear down. We can do tear downs in this particular project, but that could certainly shift the numbers a little bit as far as a loan to cost approach goes. So that's something to be considered. But this again will be based on the completed property, not based on what's currently sitting on the land if there is a tear down situation. If there's any debt on the property currently, like they already purchased the land, but they have a mortgage on that, by all means, let's make sure we get the appropriate loan balance for that mortgage that needs to be refinanced out. We want to know when they bought the property as well. The property purchase date is going to be critical as far as that seasoning period goes. As I mentioned, we have a 24-month seasoning period here so that we can treat most of these as purchases or delayed purchases, which gives us a higher LTV threshold. If they've owned the land for, say, 5 years, then we're definitely looking at a refi situation. And more likely see in those circumstances, if they don't have an existing balance on the loan, that they might be, not receiving a whole lot of funds at closing in those situations. If the property has been owned for a long time, though, certainly still give us what they paid for the lot, but also ask the borrower what they think the lot might be worth just as it is today. We'll also want to make sure we have that completed value for the what they plan to sell the property for, or what the value would be if they refi exit. If they've done any work to the property already, we want to make sure there's an understanding of what they've spent so far versus what's remaining on the budget and what we're actually going to be financing. So you might have investors who have already gotten to the point where they've got their entitlements, their plans, their permits, everything's approved. In fact, they've already done the foundation. Great. We need to know what they spent so far on that and then what's left over. And those should be separated budgets. We should see one budget line item cost for what's been completed and a second one for what's remaining. And then down here in this box, this is an opportunity for us to really describe the property and the project itself. This is where I would want to include information about, what style of home they're building, what the bed and bath count might be, what the square footage of the property will be when it's all said and done. Not everybody's going to have fully vetted and approved plans in place at the time they come to you, but they should generally have an idea of exactly what they're looking to build. And that's all we're looking for here, just enough information so we can make sure that's going to be a good conforming project for the product. As always, you want to get the guarantor's FICO scores here. Again, 680 is going to be our minimum. If they're a foreign national, this will be a drop down, just yes or no. But I'm guessing we're going to see mostly citizens here. Estimated liquidity, total net worth. These are going to be important fields to make sure the guarantor is going to be qualified and have enough reserves to complete the loan transaction. Again, don't leave the cash question to the end. That's something we should be talking about on the front end to make sure they're actually going to be able to pull this project off. And then we're looking for prior ground up construction experience. Hopefully this is going to be a lot of yeses on here. You also get the question, are the sponsors licensed builders or general contractors? If that's a yes too, that goes towards their experience. So we'll be happy to see that. And then a specific question drilling down for experience is the experience that they have already in the same general vicinity as the subject property? We want to hopefully see that they've done some work in this particular market before. If they haven't, like I said, it's not a deal killer, but it does weigh in on the approval of the loan for sure in those borderline cases. And then project details is going to get into, where are they really at with the permitting and approval phases of the loan? Are there entitlements in place, right? Entitlements is just, your legal authority to be able to actually build on that lot. Not all lots are buildable. Hopefully they didn't buy something that they didn't check on first. That could be a problem. We want to know if they have already a contractor or builder in place for the particular project. Again, that'll be key for when we order feasibility studies because there is that contractor review. Do they already have architectural plans and drawings in place? If they do, obviously, gives us a better look at what that finished product's going to be. And has the town already approved those plans? And if they've gotten really far with the project, do they already have even permits in place? Now, we can do the loans without some of these things in place already, but they're not, like we talked about before, they're not going to be getting access to the construction money until they actually have hit certain benchmarks for that. And another section here that's a little bit different is providing additional comps that have been in their particular neighborhood that they're building this property in, so that we can verify that there's values in this area that kind of conform to what the borrower is saying. Like I said, a lot of people will have had a CMA done by their realtor or something like that. That would be a great thing to be able to provide. If you guys, just are going online, provide Zillow links to the property, that's perfectly accessible as well. But we really want to see that there's some vetting process here to make sure that the property conforms to that given market and that the price point they're expecting is reasonable for that particular market. If you guys go on Therrien has a crime map, which actually shows an index of how heavy a crime area may or may not be. Don't think that'll be an issue in most areas, but if you're in certain urban markets, that can show up as potentially problematic. And Google Street View, also, like I said, one of the great tools we can use to kind of go around the neighborhood and see what else is in the area. The borrower's experience, I would reference the experience tab for these. They can just list out their projects here, give us any kind of comments or descriptions, particularly if it's a heavy rehab project. Try to get them to explain why it was a heavy rehab project. Again, we're looking for properties in those situations that had expansion to the property, square footage, or a change of use where you went from a single family to a two family. Anything that's going to trigger them to really have to go through a permitting and approval process with the city will go a long way there. And then there's a little bit of a checklist here to make sure that we have some of the supporting documentation completed for these project reviews. And then any additional information you guys want to type in, put it here. But for every ground up construction project that you guys are vetting out and wanting to submit, this should be the template that we're going off of, and this should be what you're submitting to your loan officer. And if you can, I would also like to see that you guys are also putting together the loan sizers with these as well. You're going to probably put some of these together and have some questions on them over time. Not a problem. Send those to your loan officers. As I mentioned, you might get some funky numbers in some of these scenarios, and it may be something that looks like it doesn't work in the version of the sizer that you're using, but it doesn't mean that we don't have a workaround for it either. So we'll take a couple of test runs here. We've had some submissions lately from different investors, so we'll go through a couple of practices here. And like I said, we'll choose the loan purpose first. Again, typically, most of these are going to be purchases or delayed purchases. That 24-month seasoning period is going to do us a lot of favors in this regard. We want to make sure we have the borrower's FICO score as well. Like I said, minimum credit scores for this product is going to be a 680. if you do have, somebody who has lower credit scores, but maybe they have a lot of ground up construction experience, reach out to us. There may be some flexibility there to see if we can maybe find a creative way to get that loan through. And then we're going to get into our experience categories. And you're going to see this is broken down in 3 different ways. We have heavy rehab experience, and this is going to be the number of properties that they've done that required a heavy rehab project. Again, expansion or a change in use, something that was really more of an involved rehab project. For commercial properties, ground up construction experience specific to commercial builds is going to be important here. However, this also will be a qualifier for your typical 1 to 4 family builds too. If they've built, say, a bunch of strip malls or office buildings, what have you, certainly that's experience that's relevant to doing a ground up construction, even for a single family. If anything, the ground up for commercial is just harder anyway. So, and then we're going to be looking for if they've done any ground up construction projects of their own on 1 to 4 families. This is where we'd fill that in here. So this particular scenario we had, the investor had 8 ground up construction projects completed in the past. They were not a U.S. Foreign national. They were definitely a U.S. citizen. And then we're going to look for what the completed project is going to be. And this will be similar exactly to what we have for your typical 1 to 4 family rehab or bridge loan that we're going to put into BLN or the sizer itself. This is going to be a 2,000 square foot home when it's all said and done. And again, just kind of filling out everything as it needs to be, right? You guys see yellow fields, those are potential fields that need to be filled out. This is a purchase transaction, so he's going to have no payoff amount. He was buying the land for $60,000. Hasn't bought it yet, but he's about to. And his purchase price again is going to be $60,000. I've seen a couple of sizers come over so far from brokers and correspondent lenders that we work with. The fact that most of these are purchases or delayed purchases is critical, but making sure that we actually have both of these fields filled out for as is value and the purchase price is going to be critical. If we don't have this field filled out, you're going to get the wrong loan to cost and your loan's going to look worse than it really is. So making sure we have these filled out in its entirety is going to go a long way towards making sure this is a successful deal. So their construction build costs are going to be $240,000. And they're hoping for an after repair value of $450,000. All right. So entitlements are in place here. He does not have the plans yet, but he's hoping to have those soon. And so as we start to fill in this information here, you're starting to see that the loan sizer itself is actually giving us some pertinent term kind of information that we're going to get on this side here in the blue. And so we'll make sure that we got everything filled out first. He's going to actually be holding these as a rental, and he thinks he's going to get $3,000 a month for these. Is that right? Yeah, $3,000. Okay. And then now we can kind of come over here and start getting into our final terms. 255. This will be full note interest. And again, anything as we note on the bridge deals that we do, typically anything that has an initial advance of less than $50,000, you're more likely to see a full note interest requirement on those. For these particular projects, we're going to be a little bit more common sense about when these should and shouldn't apply. A lot of that's also going to have to do with how far along they are in the permitting process. But expect most of these to, if they have an initial advance of less than 50, to quote full note interest. And what that means is they're going to be charged interest on the outstanding, on the full loan amount from day one, as opposed to the outstanding balance of the loan. If we had a higher price point here, and I'll try to quickly do a second one of these to show you what that looks like. If you're in a more urban market, had a recent one in Queens that we priced out, which didn't hit this requirement. So you'll see that pricing be a little bit different. And then we're just going to be plugging in the terms, like I said, right from here, same as the fix and flip scenario we have. And this would be, something that we could price out here. And again, down here, we're going to get our total liquidity requirement that needs to be shown. The borrower's going to have fund and interest reserve here. We're going to start to see, this all come together. And the reason I was talking about using the sizer instead of the calculator is you're going to get this additional information that you generally aren't going to see if you're on the loan calculator side. So until you guys get a little bit of a comfort level with, what impacts the loan and the pricing, I would say come into the sizer first. You're going to see for this particular market what the minimum value constraints are. You're going to see what the home price appreciation is, days on market, median home value, and again, making sure that this is somewhat conforming to our market, right? Again, we expect brand new homes to sell for a premium, so the fact that the median value is about 270 leads me to believe that we're probably in pretty good shape here in the low to mid 400s. And this particular deal is going to work in, even if it does come in lower, and even at 400, it's the same thing. Yeah, so there's a lot of meat on the bone for this investor. And again, we have that debt yield of at least 14% here, which is great. If they were going to do this as a sale exit, then they're getting a 32% return on investment, which is tremendous. When it comes down to real numbers, that might be a little bit different. As we mentioned, a lot of these projects will have some cost overruns to them. But a couple other things I want to show you guys. On the right-hand side here, you're going to get your LTV adjustments. So if we were in a given market, let's say, we're in Cape Coral here, we have a median home value of 268. If we said this home was going to sell for $800,000, now we're going to see a lower price point here, a different loan to cost approach. And we're going to be capped at 80% loan to cost in this scenario. And that's because we're losing an additional 5% here, because this property is now priced at a point where it's between 2 and 3 times greater than what the median price point is in that market. So we're getting away from what the predominant value is for that given market. We're getting more into that territory of potentially being a one-off property. Those are the things we're trying to avoid. But you'll see there's not too many different reasons why we'll have a price point change here. But the big ones are generally related to the actual value of the property in the area and where the market trends are. Home price appreciation, especially this year, has been very positive in just about every market we've seen in the country. I haven't really seen any or too many of the ones that are in the negative status these days, which is great for investors and borrowers and homeowners. But if we did have a situation where you had an area or zip code where the prices were declining in that market, you'll see a pricing adjustment over here for that. And that would be a reason why you're not getting potentially the max terms. Also, we're going to be looking at some vacancy rates too, if that happens to be an issue in a given market. And then the other thing I want to point out for you guys here is the different experience tiers and what LTVs they're eligible for and LTCs they'd be eligible for based on their experience tier qualification. We have the tier 2 qualification for this particular investor because he's got 8 for experience. If we put him up to a 10 though, that would then make him a tier 1. As a tier 1, he would even get a higher threshold of LTV and LTC. And as you notice here, the LTV and LTC are going to be listed out separately, right? Because those aren't necessarily going to be the same numbers. Our loan to cost in a lot of circumstances is going to restrict the loan. In this particular circumstance, we are at 90% loan to cost if the guy has 10 for experience. So we could actually improve our initial advance here and improve our final loan amount so that they're getting 90% of the total loan to cost. So what do we mean there? That's the $60,000 they paid for the lot plus the $240,000. So 90% of $300,000 is going to be that $270,000 cost. Our total loan is also restricted to 75% of the as constructed value of the property. In this scenario, we have an ARV that's high enough that it's not really going to be a problem for us. But let's say this came in at a lower number, say it was 350. Now we're in a circumstance where the LTV is capped out at that 75%, and we would have to adjust our numbers down. Oops, too many zeros. So kind of understanding where the pain points and the adjustment points are in a given loan scenario can really inform you about how you need to speak to your borrower and what you need to prepare them for as the loan moves forward. If you're getting a situation that's already capped out by the borrower's estimate of what the after repair value of the property is, let's have a conversation about that project and what makes sense for it moving forward. Because it may not work as something as a build and flip, but it may work as something that is a hold property that they're going to keep for rental income. And that's always a workaround for us. We just have to prove out that there's an investment value to the project. If they're not making enough of a return on investment, if the margins are too thin, then we should be looking at these as rentals potentially to get them qualified. But these are the areas that we really want to focus on. I know we're a little over time here, But I'll go through one more quickly just to kind of knock this out for you. We had a 700 credit score. He had 6 for experience, I believe. And this was a 2 to 4. This is a code. No, that's not it. Well, that's state, that's why. So there's one where you'll see a negative value impact, and you can see that over there. We'll actually get a pricing adjustment for that, so we can waive that. But this was a 4,000 square foot property. And they were buying the land. This is in New York, so higher price point. They were buying the property and land for $1 million, and they had a $1.2 million construction cost. And their after repair value was going to be 2.6. And this was something that they already had in place. They don't have the permits yet, though. Okay. It's going to require me to get the numbers. Hang on one second. Okay. Oh, that's right, backwards. Okay. Oh, I missed a 0. That's why we're getting funky numbers. My bad. Okay. So in this scenario, now we're in a situation where they're going to be getting a lot more money towards that initial land purchase that they had. So again, if we get it at 490 here, we'll put in the 100% of the construction cost. And again, we're always going to finance 100% of the construction cost when possible. If the borrower's already done some work to the property, that'll be a little bit different. But this is a scenario where we can go off that unpaid principal balance interest, which gives us a little bit better of a payment and pricing option there for the investor. Particularly on a deal of this size, you really don't want to have to charge full note interest because the borrower doesn't have access to those funds right away. So this would be the best of both worlds. But again, kind of plugging in and just following along with the information that the sizer is giving us here. This particular scenario, because it's a tier 3 investor, we're going to be capped here at 65% of the as constructed value. So that's why we're getting constrained here. If the ARV does come in a bit higher, say it comes in at like 2.8, then we're going to get some flexibility here, and we can actually go up to the full 80% loan to cost. So one of the things you guys can do to make sure you're getting the right numbers is verifying that this LTC and LTV are lining up with what we expect the tiers to be for the given scenarios. If you're not seeing this match up, the next place you want to look here is in your LTV adjustments bucket to see if there's any pricing adjustments in here that are being put in place, whether it be for median home value or declining prices in the area, credit score, what have you. We want to make sure everybody has the right information going into these so we can set proper expectations about what the pricing is going to be to our end borrowers. As I mentioned, a little over time here. I'm sure some of you guys are going to have questions. Certainly reach out to your loan officers for some specific scenario questions you guys might be going through, or even just basic guideline questions or best practices as far as how to approach these scenarios. Can't stress enough though, the ground up construction template, this is what you guys really want to be working off of and have open and ready anytime you're screening a new investor through to see if they're going to be able to qualify for their ground up construction project. It takes a little while to do it. I don't doubt that it's going to take a few minutes to get used to it. But spend the time now to get a comfort level with the project, get a comfort level with the materials and the guidelines. The more of these you guys do, the easier it will become. And once we kind of get through the vetting process of these loans, from there, it's just a matter of working a regular loan process for us, right? We're going to order the reports. We're going to collect the standard documentation. Everything else is going to look the same. It's the front end of these things that really needs to have the work done. That's a little bit of a change from where we are on some of the other things we do, where some of the work is spread out over the life of that loan process. But on the ground up construction projects, and I would also say this applies to the multifamily and mixed use projects you guys are going to be sending over, it pays to do the work up front. If we fully vet these things on the front end and we're getting these submission templates sent over, This will give your borrowers a fast and efficient process, and it will give them accurate information about what we can and can't do for them. If we have missing information, if we have incorrect information, we're likely to have changes in terms or adjustments made to the loan, or potentially the loan doesn't even work if we have the wrong information in there. So it's important that we're actually getting real quality information from our investors and borrowers, so that everything goes through in a smooth process here. We want to make this easy for everybody as possible, and to make a complicated product like this a little bit simpler, we're going to go with this ground up construction template so that everybody can fill it out, send it over, and then boom, we're off to the races on these deals. As you guys will probably see, there's not as much competition in the market for some of these multifamily and mixed use deals we're doing, or the ground up construction deals. The price point, we've surveyed from different lenders in the market for this particular product, is really near the bottom. It's a very cost effective product, and the LTVs and LTCs are also in line with other lenders out there in the marketplace. So we shouldn't be getting stiff competition necessarily from a pricing or LTV perspective on these particular scenarios. The exception is going to be, your builder or contractor who has a deal arranged with their local bank or credit union. Those are obviously going to be cheaper options in most circumstances, regardless of it's a ground up construction project or some other type of project. But for anybody who can't qualify for those sweetheart deals from traditional lenders, they should be in our space. They should be coming here. Lastly, thank you guys for taking the time to join us today. As we mentioned, the recordings, these videos will be available going forward. And make sure you guys are talking to your loan officers. Make sure you're getting this ground up construction template form. Make sure you're using that loan sizer so you guys can get some familiarity with the product. And then send those questions and scenarios over to your loan officer so we can start the dialogue and get a comfort level going with this particular product. If we can establish good borrowers coming through and completing these loans, they are bound to come back and do more. Ground up construction is going to be a bigger and bigger product as the year goes on. You guys all know that borrowers are having a hard time finding inventory. There is a lot of competition out there from institutional investors now who are trying to buy up 1 to 4 family properties all across America. That makes it harder for our one-off investors to find those kind of projects. Ground up construction is a great alternative for experienced investors to basically, not have to fight over these properties with some of the extra competition that's out there, and really get themselves established as a new builder, which can also give them a nice return on investment, or even a great cash flowing property. So tremendous opportunity with these products, but it all starts with starting out and having the right information up front and making sure that we have a timely process in place. So again, please submit any inquiries and questions you guys might have to your loan officers. Thank you again for joining us. If you get the opportunity, reach out, say hi to Tiffany, and follow up with the BLN team for any system questions you guys might have. We'll have another training session next month. We're going to also be getting you guys out some guidelines and product information forms so you guys can get a little bit of a deeper understanding of what expectations are with each of the loan products. So we're very excited to be able to get that out to you guys later on this month as well. So a lot more will be coming. Stay tuned. And thank you again for joining us today, and hope you guys all have a great afternoon.
Hey, Chris.
Yes.
We did have a couple questions if we just wanted to go through. We had 3 that came in.
Sure, let's try to knock them out quick.
Perfect. Can foreign nationals qualify for this program?
Foreign nationals are going to have a harder time qualifying for it. I would say your best bet is to really try to get a U.S.-based citizen on the loan itself. It will go a long way towards getting that particular deal done. But if we do have a true foreign national, we can still price those people out. You're going to get better options though if we do have a citizen on the deal.
Perfect. Thank you. Do you know about how long it takes to get a draw, like the whole process with the title rundown check?
Yeah, we're going to start the title rundown as soon as we get those. Those come back fairly quickly. So generally speaking, I would say you're about a week for the draw process there. It depends on how quickly we can also get access to the property and get the inspection scheduled, what have you. But it's going to be about a week on those.
Thank you. Could somebody use this program on prefab homes?
No, it doesn't work the same, unfortunately, for any kind of like modular builds or prefabbed homes. These would be, stick-built homes.
Will the terms be determined by LTC and LTV compared to purchase and construction costs?
Yeah, it's going to be one or the other, depending on what the cost approach is going to show you there. So if I can go back here, this is what we're really looking at here in these particular scenarios. So if the ARV comes in high enough, we're going to be off that LTC number, which will be listed out down here in your grid. If we have a bit of a tighter constrained loan where the LTV comes in a little bit lower, then we're going to be restricted based on our tier 3 here at 65% of the as constructed value. So it's always going to be the lesser of the two. While we'd like to say it's the greater of the two, that's not how lenders typically will do it.
Are these loans available only to builders, or can a consumer use this as well?
So no, you don't have to be the builder yourself, but if you're the investor who's done ground up construction projects before or heavy rehab projects before, you can still qualify for this loan. But you're not going to have a true first-time investor on any of these projects. It should be somebody who does have a track record, like I said, of experiencing what it's like to go to the town and submit plans for approval and go through that permitting process. We want to see that people have that experience in place. And if somebody's an established builder themselves, but maybe they've been doing it for other people, we will certainly consider that as experience and try to make loans work for those investors as well. So maybe it's their first true project in their own name, but they are their own licensed builder and they've done a whole bunch of projects. We're certainly going to take that into consideration and get them qualified.
Could the same be applied if it's a new investor with no experience, but they have an experienced builder on the project?
If they do have an experienced builder on the project, we will consider those. It will be a much easier scenario if the builder is actually willing to be a part of the loan as well. So there might be a bit of a sharing incentive that has to be negotiated there with the builder as far as the profit goes. But we are certainly open to those scenarios, and we're going to try to do what we can to be flexible on these. Some of you guys have already sent over scenarios. We're seeing a very high approval rate on what is being sent over. The things that are usually getting rejected are really projects that don't make sense or don't conform to market, or maybe are a little bit more of a tract development. Those are scenarios where we're seeing most of the denials. They're really more to the guidelines than they are to the pricing itself. But as I said, if you guys are pricing these out and you're getting weird numbers or something doesn't make sense to you, let's run those up to the flagpole before we say no right away, because we're doing everything we can to find a little bit of flexibility within the guidelines with our investors so that we can say yes to as many of these as we can.
Thank you. Is the borrower funding, I'm sorry, is the borrower funding the interest reserve, or are we financing the interest reserve like a typical bank would do?
Yeah, we're going to finance it whenever possible. I'm sure there's going to be scenarios where there's no equity to make that happen on the front end. So they would, in some circumstances, have to pay those out of pocket. But in most of the circumstances we've seen so far, they're able to fund that from the initial advance of the loan.
Thank you. What does property value to MHV between 200% and 300% mean?
So yeah, your property value to median home value. So the median home value is what this current market is seeing as the median home value. So if you guys remember way back in the day, you guys were in math class, either in elementary school or maybe this was middle school or junior high, we would talk about the mean, the median, and the mode for a set of numbers, right? The mean was the average of the set of numbers. The median is the midpoint of those set of numbers, and the mode was the most common number that came up of the group. So when we're talking property values, that median home value is where the middle price point is for that given marketplace. So based on this zip code, the median value, the midpoint of this marketplace is $499,137, and that's going to be used as the basis for this LTV adjustment here. So if our property value after repair is more than 200 to 300% of the median home value, you'll see this triggered. Now it doesn't trigger here because this is a 4-family. This is going to apply to your single family properties. So in this scenario, we have a $2.6 million property in a market that's mostly about $500,000 properties. Now you're seeing that as a non-permitted loan. And so that's why, because this is a little bit more than 5 times greater or 500% of the median home value.
Do you know if there is this sizer that's available to the correspondent lenders?
Yes, you guys should have access to this. If you don't have the latest version, reach out to your loan officer. Have them send you the latest sizer as well as the ground up construction template we were using before. You definitely want to have both of those ready to go. The most current version right now is still dated 3/11. There should be an update, I would think, coming soon, though. We're going to have some tweaks to the ground up construction that should get a little bit better. So there'll be a new one coming out, I would say, in the next week or two.
Perfect. I'll let everybody know if a new sizer comes out too, and email blast for you guys. Can any development be included, or is it just vertical building on the home itself?
If we're talking about a project where they just want to put an addition onto an existing project or existing structure or house, that's still going to fall under our old residential transition loan. So this will be the RTL loan, which we use for fix and flips. And then we're just going to count that as an expansion of the property. So that'd be yes. And then we would want to put, well, how many square feet are you actually adding to the property? Maybe they're adding 1,000 square feet. And that's going to trigger that as a heavy rehab loan and a feasibility study, but it's not considered a ground up project. That's a separate type of deal. I would consider that under the fix and flip pricing.
Thank you. Can developers subordinate the land for these deals?
I think I heard you say subordinate.
Yes.
So for the if there's any financing on it, if we're talking about like for subordinate financing, no, that's not an option. So if it's something seller finance or anything like that, that would still have to stand up on its own, and we would have to pay that off. The lien that we're putting on the property should be the only lien.
All right, those are all the questions we have right now. If you guys have any further questions, feel free to email them over to your loan officer, or you can email it to one of us. But thank you guys for attending. I hope that answered all the questions that you had.
Thank you, everybody.